The original trip was 2020, and because of COVID, we canceled the trip, but they wouldn't refund anything. So we said, okay, they promised same prices for 2021, so we went in 2021. It was August 7th, August 18th. No, 20. It was 17 days. But COVID had a lot of bad issues. We went through 4 COVID tests through the 3 weeks that we were away, but it kept the crowds down. And unfortunately for Africa, that was not a good thing because they depend on the tourism industry for their deal. In fact, the driver said that they had 5% of their population had their shots. They went policemen, teachers, tour guides. That was the third group. Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Medical was the first group. And it wasn't teachers. They shut down the school. As soon as they had anything going on, they closed them for 9 months. There was no question, no doubt. They just didn't have school. So up here, the very rough drawing here, this is Kenya, and down here is Tanzania. We did this area here. So we didn't do a large area, but it covered most of the national parks. We went through a company called Timbuktu, and they are based here in the United States, and they ask you what you want to go see. And then from there, we had another couple traveling with us who had a lot of friends that have gone there, so they knew what places that we wanted to go see, and then they would set up all the hotel rooms or tent camps, tour guide, anything you needed for the trip. Enter flights, during the trip, but not the flight over or the flight back. And the company in Africa was called Albatross. So we'll go with that, and we'll start just looking at some of the things, and I'll interject. I will probably breeze through the first ones here. That's our luggage. It's 35 pounds because of the inter-flights that we had to take in Africa. So they said 35 pounds, but when we got there, we saw people with bigger suitcases and a lot more weight. We flew to Chicago on Friday night, and on Saturday morning at 1:25, we flew to Doha. That's a 15-hour flight. Luckily, we could sleep. So we went from Doha. We actually everything backwards. We went from Pittsburgh to Chicago, over to Doha, and then finally down to Tanzania, Kilimanjaro. So we got one picture in Qatar. The airport was not very crowded. And then the flight to Kilimanjaro left at 1:40 a.m. And we arrived in Kilimanjaro at about 7:30 in the morning. That was our plane. So that was their big airport and their landing. From Kilimanjaro, we drove. Our guide picked us up and drove us to our first stay. And it was a rest and relaxation, get ready for the trip type stay. And it was called Mount Muir Game Lodge. And these are some of the shots along the way. There's always a very wide dirt berm along the side of the road, if the road is paved at all. And they're always going for water. And it was Sunday. So we got some people in their Sunday best. And we got to the lodge. And that's our first animal. It's a zebra donkey. And a friendly stork along the way. There were monkeys, very beautiful long white tails. And this is a gentleman from Albatross. He was overseeing to make sure that we had a good trip. So he came out to greet us. And this is the other couple, Richard and Susan, that were traveling with us. And you can see the outside picnic area, dinner area for the lodge. And this was right outside our cabin. What's that? It was December. Excuse me, it was their winter. So being their winter, it was about 65, 66 degrees. There were no bugs. It was very peaceful. Every bed we had netting to go around it, and they sprayed and everything, but they didn't really need it. This was a pool. Obviously, no one would use it, and there weren't many people in the site itself. We saw a lot of verret monkeys. They like to water you if you walk under them. There's storks and trees, and this was our first stay. We had this half of the building for our bedroom, and we never spent much time in the rooms. It was just too beautiful. We got the rest. We took a nap, had a glass of wine before we started our trip over to Tarangire National Park. And this is where we really get to see the first of Africa. And then from there we went up to Ngorongoro farmhouse, which is right before a large crater where they have a lot of different animals. And this was our vehicle. It was named Wildebeest 2, or 1. Wildebeest, because it was a beast. It supposedly sat 7. I'm glad we only had 4. It was comfortable, and we moved around, and this popped up so you could stand up and look out and take pictures, and you weren't forced to stay down when traveling through the national parks.
We were told to wear khaki, green, or brown so that we didn't startle the animals. So if you notice all the pictures, that's all we're wearing.
So since it is their winter, there's a lot of the crops are done, nothing's really in bloom, the grasses are low, but this is their typical road. This is a major road. They didn't have a lot. They have a nice cart. We were going through Ashra, which is one of the larger cities. You can see some along the way. The road is a nice, very nice road, and since it is an English colony, or it was an English colony, Kenya and Tanzania both, they spoke English as their second language. Swahili was their first, and they took American dollar. So we didn't have to exchange anything. That's one of the traveling things that turned out really nice. They were always going somewhere to get something, water, sell goods, and it's all usually by foot. And this is getting into one of their major metropolitan cities. It's not, there are some, what you see, but this is their work crew. Gentleman has a gun. This is their prison crew, the prison work. They're building a cauldron of sorts here, I think, along the road. And we passed the United Nations building there. But you always had animals out in the field. The first thing you build when you get property in Africa is a fence. There's a wall. They don't build their buildings, they build their wall to show ownership of that particular property. There were large ditches and culverts along the way, all caused by the rainy season, which was usually January to March, maybe a little into April. And this is the typical hut for the Maasai people. This is one of their towns. I guess you would call it, off the road, not far, but they set up their fruit stands or whatever they're selling. They either live behind the building or they live out in the bush and walk into the city or the town. And these people here are like our Native Americans, the Indians. They are the Maasai tribe. They are a nomadic tribe where they just walk their cattle where the cattle want to walk. And they're walking them to find green grass. You can see there's not much green grass around there right now. And since it is winter, they were very cold. We were very comfortable. I mean, we were taking our coats off and they were putting everything on that they could find to put on. Just different scenes. This tree here is called Baboa's tree. I'm terrible at pronunciation, but they use the wood for shelter, leaves for making soup, medicines for treating wounds, diarrhea, and asthma. So it's municipal. Obviously, winter, there's no leaves. I would have liked to see one of those in full bloom, but we didn't. And we finally made it to our first park, and you're seeing the typical road, which is dirt. Termite mounds with zebras, and the grass is still fairly high here. And this is Tarangire National Park. It's one of their bigger national parks that they have around here. And there's a couple antelope. Animals have the right of way. So if they're crossing in front of you, you watch them cross. There's ostriches, and these are vultures and giraffes. And we finally found our first really neat place, and you can see all the animals there, and it's a watering hole. They took turns coming in. The elephants stayed. The zebras would come in, drink, go out, and then the wildebeest would come in, drink. And if anybody got too close to the elephants, they would charge them. And we'd sit there. We sat there for a good half hour, 40 minutes, watching them just come in and out, and watching how the animals interacted. It's not a real big pond because it's the dry season also. And it's just getting into their next 2 months, it's supposed to rain a little bit. So they were hoping to get some rain and some more water. A lot of beautiful birds, the black-necked heron. And the animals don't usually fight amongst each other. The lions are the top predators. The elephants play and the zebras play around with each other. We did not see any. I'm sure they would take whatever they wanted. The wild boar, we called him Puma because we were talking about the Disney movie. And wildebeest jumping around. It's a good view of what a wildebeest is. These poor animals, there's hundreds, thousands of them around, but they're the top of the food chain for every animal that eats meat, whether it be lion, hyena, jackal. That's probably why there's so many of them. So we finally went back on the road and we saw different birds. And you can see how brown the grass is. They find shade. This was a sunny day, so they find shade wherever they can find shade. And the reason the zebras are black and white striped is they keep the tsetse flies. Can't see what kind of animal it is because it's black. The black and white screws with their eyes and they can't see, so they don't bother the zebras. So they had black flags hanging places and just keep the bugs down, but we were lucky. Some beautiful birds. Yeah. I don't know if it's prohibited. We never saw anybody smoking. You know, yeah, the grasses, you can see the grassland in that, but you'll see in the Serengeti that they actually do burn parts deliberately so that the next time it turns green, and they just keep alternating it for the animals. This was the first tree we got to see, and it's loaded with baboons. And then another tree with the monkeys. This is the male ostrich and the female ostriches. And our first look at a giraffe, but if you'll notice here on the ground, the hyena. They didn't seem to be afraid of each other. And this mouse-like, rat-like animal here is called an elephant shrew or a sangi. It is a member of the elephant family because of the way the legs work. So that's the smallest member of the elephant family. And there's hawks. And this is a secretary bird. He's awfully wet. It's black and white. I've got other shots of him. You'll see a little, but I thought that was a neat shot of him. And giraffes were always like, where's Waldo? And if you look, there's giraffes hiding all over the place. And then we left the park and headed to where we were going to stay the first night or second night, and that was the Ngora crater area. And you can see the road. Again, it's paved, which is nice because it's the last of the paved roads we're going to have for a long time. And sitting along the road, you have the animals, and it's hard to see, but this is a lake. Nara Lake, Nari Lake, which there's a national park there where we'll visit the next day. And this is their tourist trap. Also shopping center where you could get tanzanite, which is the only place Tanzania, that you can get. It's the only country that makes or produces or finds the tanzanite. The Ngora farmhouse. This was all their property back here, loaded with flowers. I'm sure would be much more beautiful in the summer and spring. And this is the friendly ostrich. And this deck is where we ate dinner and lunch. So they set up tables, and that's the view of the social area of the house. And this was the deck where that picture was taken. And that's our room. And you can see the netting if you wanted to drop netting, and you can go out on the porch, and they lit the fireplace at night if you told them you wanted the heat, but that was the heat if you were cold. There were no heaters or anything in there. They did have hot water though. And it was Jane's birthday, so we had them light a cake. They lit a cake. They were supposed to do a lot more, but somewhere the wires got crossed and they didn't do a very good job of celebrating. But we got it a little bit later, and we'll show you. The next day we headed to the lake, and we had walking her children to school. And it's like Manyara National Park. Caribou is a greeting for welcome or hello. And it's known for the home of the climbing lions. So we got to see baboon colony first and some monkeys. And they're very interesting birds. And they're actually behind us. We could turn around and look and see. And there's two other vehicles, but I don't think we ran across them again. There was nobody really in the park, which was nice. The lake belongs back here. And because of all the rain that they've had in the past year and 2 years, it's actually flooded itself, which has chased away all the flamingos, which was their big draw because their source of food was gone. And there's our sleeping lions. And there's actually a natural hot spring that feeds into the lake. I couldn't find the name of this bird. I loved the tail, and the color was really nice. And if I can get this. He's screaming away. And then we ran across some giraffes and pelicans and eagles. I think that's a eagle also. And this was the view out of our room back at the farmhouse. And this is we stayed outside the Nicola crater, but you can see this area here is the crater. And there's only 3 ways down. One here, and one over here. And this road was broken here, so there was only one way down and one way back out. So we had to take the long way in. And this is the Google Earth picture of it. There's a lake in the middle of it, and you can see that there's not a lot around there. I wanted to show you this because the next day we were going to the gate 104 kilometers away, and then another probably 50 kilometers. But we went 6 to get to the viewpoint and then head down into the crater. And we stopped at the gorge here, and we'll show you more of that later. But it says no entry, but it's because that was usually an exit only out of the crater, but because of the road being closed, you had to go in. So at certain hours you were allowed to go in, certain hours you had to come out. And it was a foggy, rainy-ish day, so you can't see the rim of the crater up here, but you can see part of the lake. And in the crater itself, there were all kinds of birds, an Egyptian goose, gray-crowned crane. They pose for us. Volcano. And it's the land is obviously sunken back down. This is a little Thompson gazelle. And this is the orange-billed stork that we got to look at. And they like you can see the road. That's why we did this here. The standing joke in the vehicle was, if you were in the middle seat, you got 20,000 steps on your Fitbit. And if you were on the back seat, you got 30,000. So they were nice, smooth roads because we got out and walked a whole lot. But this is a jackal, beautiful looking animal. And the hippopotamuses in the background, they were quite far away. This is an impala. The animals weren't afraid of us. We were not allowed out of the vehicles, and the Jeeps and the trucks or the Toyota there did not scare them at all. And there was a lot of interaction with the animals. They had their mates, white crown bird. And this is really part of a flooded area. It's never dried out because of the rain. And the flamingos, different kinds of birds. Secretary bird is really it's a large bird, and it's really pretty in flight. And this here is the white ibis, the one with the black head. I don't know if these were the females, or they're definitely not even the same family as the bird, the ibis there. And the road stops. The sign says, "No road." In short, don't drive through it. So we had to turn around, and we had boars, wild boars again, hawks, and they're roaming everywhere. These are wildebeests. Geese going for a ride on the elephants. Still had their young animals. And this was the only place we were allowed to get out of the vehicle. This was our lunch area. When we first went in and looked at these things, they said you'd go on a safari in the morning, come back to your tent until the mid-afternoon, and then you'd go out again. Well, every day we got up about 7, ate breakfast, got on the road about 8 o'clock, had a box lunch packed at the camps, took with us, and we got back about 5, 6 o'clock. So all the days that we're out touring, we're seeing the different areas. The crater, we had to be out by 6. That gate we passed through locks at 6. Nobody gets in, nobody gets out after that. So our driver wanted to make sure that we were out by that certain time. And this particular bird is a Corey bustard. We ran into a herd of elephants again. That's the youngest, I think. What's that? In all the national parks and that, they had gentlemen walking around with guns. And it wasn't for the animals. It was for the poachers. So yeah, there's poaching, but in fact, our guide that took us here used to take people on safaris to kill animals. He said he just didn't want to do it anymore. He said plus if you do it now, it's about $40,000 just to go in and hunt. This elephant walked up to us, flapped his ears, and we immediately backed up. Like I said, they were not afraid of us. They got very close to them. And that's a black mamba. You're glad you're in the car at that point. Very dangerous. It was crossing the road and took up about 3/4 of the road here. And across the road, that's why we could see it. Otherwise, we would have never found it. The colony of baboons and everything. This little bird, I couldn't find the name of it. It's very interesting. It has a real squawky call, but he built this nest. This is his nest here, this whole area. We were looking for the last of the big 5 we hadn't seen, which was the rhinoceros, and we couldn't find one. And there was one in the park here, and they got word that there was one walking around, and everybody's flying to get to that spot, but nah, we couldn't see any. So on our way out, this is our way out. So you can see the rim barely up here. So this is the drop of the crater, which is quite a bit. And when we were on the road heading out, we had a little bit of an elephant quarrel. And they're blocking the road, having their little bit of, I'm in charge of this type deal. The next day, we left the farmhouse and went around the crater, stopped at a Maasai village, came to what they called the Cradle of Humanity, and then we did a little bit of touring and went to our tent camp. So we're staying in tents now out in there. And these are people just walking to school. Yes. This is the work crew, the road crew. They did not have machines. They would, if the road needed fixed, they'd dump loads of dirt, and these guys would come around and they'd have a road grader. It's the one that has the blade in the middle of its body, and it would semi-grade it, and then you ended up with a real nice washboard. The giraffes were fun. But this is coming down out of the crater region into, we're heading to the Serengeti. And you see all the Maasai people are wearing their blankets because they're cold. And they were not real heavy blankets. They were not real thick. This is an aerial view of what a Maasai village looks like out in the Serengeti. They put sticks around to keep animals out. They build their huts, and they store their animals in here. And out here is the school building. The government says they have to teach their young, up to 6 years old, I think, in the village, and then they can take them to the public schools, but there's none close, so it'd be a far walk. So that's their max education in a lot of cases. But this is the road. It's obviously dirt and washboard. I really don't know. What's that? No, no. We stopped. This was really neat because we're driving down the road, and the driver goes, "Do you want to see a village? You want to see what it looks like?" And that. So we pulled in, and they have a chief. This is their village. They might have a few men out with the animals, walking with them, but this is their village. And you negotiate to go look at their village. We bought their water truck that was coming. We paid for their water when we, basically with our fee. So they had a big water tank that they got filled. But this here, you want to give me your microphone a second? Messiah village along the Serengeti plain. They're welcoming us. The women would shrug their shoulders to make their necklaces bounce. So you can see this is the village. This is a close-up of her house. And this is her schoolhouse. I don't know if you could hear all that or not, but this is how they had their youngest. And these are tables that went around where they stored the animals. And there, every woman in the tribe supposedly did their handmade items and sold them. So at the end of their tour, we walked around here and picked up items, and then she would come and we'd negotiate a price. But there were so many items that were similar, it found hard to believe that they made them themselves. But they depend on tourism so much. This was the chief. He's the one that we talked to and negotiated the price. We did go into, oh, I forgot. They tried to show us how they started fire with rubbing the stick, and you can see it was wet, so they didn't have much success at getting their fire started, but that's supposedly how they started their fires. The schoolhouse. They did the alphabet. Now, but if you took them out of sequence, they didn't know. Sorry. So they memorized them, but they memorized them in order. You would go in a doorway and you double back to go into this. There is a small hole in the roof for their cooking fires and their heat, and barely enough room to lay down and sleep. And that was about 6 people in each one of those huts. Let's look at the village as we were leaving. This is the cradle of humanity. They built a museum, which is here. The line is from Google Earth. They know wherever you are. And this is the area that was once a river. They called it the Olduval, cradle of humankind. And we bring props. The two human skulls, the jawline is different and the brain is different. That's what this explanation is. The one on the left was the earlier, smaller brain human, Homo sapiens. But once this valley was a great big river. So they found remains up top. And then they went down and found another one, a different types of archaeology. And there are 7 different generations or humankind that lived in this valley at one point in time. As the water receded from the icebergs melting and everything else, you can see what happened to the land. So this is a larger view of the valley, the river valley that was. They did have a couple busloads of kids there, taking them on tour, showing them the human. And we finally made it to the Serengeti. And they decorated up some things. And the first animal we get to see is a little lizard. But you can see how it looks dry and burnt. Again, it's not the rainy season. It's been through the entire dry season. And this guy was walking along the road and coming to his mate. It was just cool to see how the animals interacted with each other. The female ostrich and Thompson gazelles and palas with its young. Elephants. But contrary to popular thought, the Serengeti is not all dry. they have a river running through it. So they have a lot of the blue heron, black-headed blue heron, and there is green, but we got to see our leopards in the tree. It was cold. They weren't moving around a whole lot. And this is the tree in long shot. The leopards are right there. So we didn't get too close. The trail did not go too close to those. And you can see how close the lions are. And we got to see all facets of life. The female wakes up, talks to the male, and that took about 4 seconds. Different animals we have, again, we're not concerned with each other on a lot of cases. If you look at the road, you can see you didn't go too fast when you're traveling on these roads. And when you did bounce around a lot. You got the hippopotamuses. This was just like a deep creek, a deep spot in a creek where they were all congregating. And lions, they're 5 feet from the road. And they're tired, so they're laying down quite often. And their young cubs are all feeding. And then that was about 1 mile from our tent camp. And this is, you can see the tents here. And this is the road that you go in. It's called Kitty Kitty, and Kitty Kitty means center. So this is the middle of the Serengeti. Tent was big enough for a queen-size bed. There was a shower behind this zip, and then behind this flap here is the toilet. And our shot outside, looking out of the tent at the sunset, little different view of the tent. This pole right here has 2 buckets on it. One is cold, and then they bring a bucket of hot water, and you turn the 2 spigots, and that's your shower. It's your bucket shower. It was fine until they poured 2 hot buckets in ours. So we got out real quick. But this is the social area, dining hall, and there's a social area here. And this is a termite lodge. It's no longer active, obviously, wouldn't be that close, but you can see the tables they have set up. There was one other couple in this camp. And then the next day we drove to the northern Serengeti. And you can see the bumps in the road there. The fruits were local, and they were very good. But the other things, I would say, were nothing special. There wasn't any African cuisine, as you could say.
We had soups with each meal, and they really didn't do desserts, sweet desserts.
If you look, there's a couple lions out here, and this is in the lower grass. Can you imagine in the summer when that grass is higher? You could easily get lost. Why are the trees flat on top? The hedge clippers. The balls on the top of their head here, if they're rounded, that's a female. If they are flat, it's a male. That's always learned the difference between them. And of course, we had to go for a COVID test because the next day we were going to be leaving the Serengeti and heading out to Kenya. We were leaving Tanzania. And Tanzania required a, so they have a tent set up. This is their hospital in the Serengeti. If there's a problem or an emergency, they have a rapid response ambulance and probably an airlift if you needed an airlift. But before we left, or when we got there, we had to show proof that we joined this ambulance authority. These two elephants were walking side by side, and then suddenly they're following each other because of the lion in front of them. It's always interesting to see how they interact with each other. Jane in her giraffe earrings. It was warm enough to stand up while he was driving for us, but they were freezing. So. They hunt at all times of the day. We were, you want to call them, Jane?
We could hear them at night. We could hear the wildebeest from our tent camp and the zebras and the lions. One night we heard a kill while we were laying in our beds. So I asked our driver the next morning, I said, if we heard the lions, does that mean they're hunting? And he went, oh no, if they're hunting, you won't hear a thing. But I think all the tent camps were guarded by men with rifles. And you weren't allowed to leave your tent. You could leave your tent at night, but you had to tell somebody and they would come to get you and take you where you needed to go.
You would have to signal with a flashlight or something. So on the trip, we ran into, this is where we ate lunch, right in front of another leopard tree. Beautiful animals. And this is, again, the Serengeti is not totally dry. This little animal is called a dink-dink. That is a full-grown animal. And you can see the rock beside it. And we were always joking, how did this little guy get up here? And there's the ladder on the other side of the rock or something, I don't know. And the pride of lion that were close to our tent. The zebras are always usually in with the wildebeest, and they work with each other. The zebra will eat the tall grass so that the wildebeest can get to the low grass that they eat. The zebras will have better eyesight, so they will see predators before the wildebeest will. And the wildebeest can sense water 3 days out. So they work with each other. They're not independent of each other. They work with each other. And this is a baby Pumbaa. And this is our buffalo. I kept calling them water buffalo. The buffalo. And we made it to our northern camp. They had a bonfire right outside their main area, and you can see the animals right outside and you could, in the morning, you'd see drippings of animals did pass through the tent camp. But I was never afraid or anything like that. There's a little better view of the buckets and the poles for our showers, and they were happy to greet us. We were the only people in this camp. They have 14 tents. This was another Sunday. We just toured the northern Serengeti. And you'll see this line here is the Kenya line. So You can no longer go between Kenya and Tanzania without going through customs. Kenya's tourism was a lot better than Tanzania, so they'd stay in Kenya. People would stay in Kenya and then drive over to Tanzania to look at the Serengeti. So they were losing all this trade. So they said, no, you can no longer do that. They closed the post. So there is a kill here, and there is a pecking order. The hyena is getting his, and then you have the storks and the vultures waiting. Wildebeest, hyenas I've seen more than once. They come up and touch noses. Two zebras playing. Jane said it's all fun and games till someone breaks a leg. And this is sort of a rookery. These are all vultures, but these are their vultures' nests. And this is the secretary bird I was talking about. Beautiful in flight along the water. This is a river we crossed. That's the bridge. It just has a bunch of holes for the water to pour out underneath. So if you get high water, you're not getting to the other side of this. And all the animals waiting to do their migration now, because we're getting closer to Kenya, and the grasses here are, you'll notice, a little greener, a little bit higher than they were down in the lower part of Tanzania. The animals follow a cycle, and I'll show you that in a minute. This is real quick, just to give you, we rode along this for kilometers, and you can see the thousands of animals that are there. It's a bit jumpy, but I thought you needed to see, you know, I didn't expect to see that many animals. And then we have the cheetah. And we have beautiful cheetahs. And they walked along the way, and there's about 6 or 7 vehicles following them. And then they just sat down there for about 5 minutes or so. And then they took off. The jeeps couldn't keep up with them. They found food, and if you want to look away, you'll see how heavy they're breathing here, but you can see it's chasing a little, it's a Thompson gazelle. This is the first one that left, and this one got there quicker. You can see the head, and we'll just, okay, I think you're safe. He's just chasing them down. The driver said the way they kill their young, they suffocate them. They'll put the head in the mouth and suffocate them so that when they die, they don't eat them while they're living. And we have a hyena and a buffalo. But it's just part of the life. You'll see the storks standing, waiting for the vultures. The storks' beaks aren't strong enough to pull the meat off. So they wait for a vulture to get a piece of meat, and they peck at the vulture who drops the piece of meat, and then they steal the piece of meat. So they're poachers. And I wanted to see this. I was glad I could see the ostriches standing in a row. And then we went back across the bridge. And here's a little better look of the flat top of the giraffe. and then another salamander. I like how they hide, and then they're younger right beside them. And they turn to look at you once in a while. But there's giraffes back in here. They're all over the place. And the boars and their family. Watch their legs. When they walk, the left side moves and the right side moves. They don't stagger their legs. I thought that was interesting. An animal that large, they go left side, right side on their movement. And if this doesn't make you yawn, nothing will. We were the only ones in this camp. So our driver, this is our driver here, he ate with us. Usually they don't interact. And the next day we drove again around a tour, and this is the first zebra that we saw that was down. I love this shot, but if you look in the background, there's a jackal just waiting his turn. But I turned away and I couldn't find the lions again. You had to, I know they're in that patch of grass somewhere. You know, sometimes they'd bring their head down a little lower, you couldn't find them. And you could get a good look at the claws of the vulture and its beak. And they would run at the other vultures, chasing them away so they could get their turn. I think this is the bird that they said was the most beautiful bird with all the colors and had the worst song of all the birds. We're driving along the road and we're wondering, why is everybody looking this way? And if we, it locked up on me just 1 second. Got to get back. Up here, there's 2 lions here. Under this bush, there's about 3 more. And when you looked, they were all over this hillside. So they were just keeping an eye out. And you can see them, there they are up here. And we had baboons running across. Yeah. And this is the northernmost gate of the Serengeti. No one watching it. We ate lunch there, but good shot of the buffalo. The female, the horns don't connect here. And an eland has the spiraled points. The impala, I missed the A, impala. The toby, which is a smaller. The buffalo, the hippopotamus, the wildebeest, and then the eland, another eland with the spiral. They had them sitting at the encampment there. It's another view of the giraffe walking, and you get a look at its left leg, left, right. And along the river, this is Find a Pride, and this is my favorite shot posed for us. And the mother elephant pushing the baby up. See. And this bull elephant was just walking. He wasn't around anybody. I imagine he was going to meet with the other animals there. But you can tell he's an older elephant. And then we drove by the lions again. And they had enough of sitting up. This is a map that Jane found of the migrations and the months and years. They'd go down where the green grass is, and in May, June, July. We were there in August, September. So they were up here in the Masai Mara, which is Kenya. And we were down here in the Serengeti. But we did manage to see one semi-crossing here. But they will not go down until the zebra go down. They wait for the zebra. I need to get the sound. You hear that squeaking noise? That's the zebra. One of the zebra young ones was on the other side, got away from these ones, and he kept calling back and forth. But the grass is greener on the other side. That's the only reason they cross. And there were herds of them. And then coming back where we saw those lions on the hill, this guy got one. And we were lucky to see this guy. He crossed the road in front of us, and we literally stopped and had to look. And that's called a cervelle. It's a small golden cat. We're very lucky to see that animal. And a nice ending to the night. This was a frustrating day, and I wanted to show you. We left here, right about here. This was our taxi. And we were going to here, 20 kilometers away. But because we had to leave Tanzania and go into Kenya and then fly into the Masai Mara, it took 7.5 hours. So we're glad the South lost. But it was a beautiful morning. We actually, first time we've seen the sun rays, how you usually see those in pictures of sun rays on the Serengeti. The eland, bigger animal, and that was our taxi. He would fly over the field, make sure there were no animals, and then turn around and come back and land. And we said bye to our wildebeest one. And up in the plain, you can see the animals. And this is Lake Marnara again with the lions in the trees. This is their airport. Our plane had an issue, and we had to wait for them to fly another plane up from Kilimanjaro to continue on. So we had sat in that airport for a little bit. And this is a look at that lake, and you can see how high the water is. You know, it needs to be back here. And these are the roads that we traveled when we're on the lake. And when you land, or when you're getting on the plane, this is our pilot, And this is the hand sanitizer, and you're wearing masks. And this is the city of Nairobi, 5 million people. So yeah, they do have big cities, and they have big city problems. They have growth of the city surrounding the slum areas of the city, just like any big city would have. And they don't have many major roads, and the one major road was under construction, and it was a joy to ride. Another shot of a Maasai village. But you can see these were the roads going to the Masai Mara. That's why we fly. And that's the airstrip we landed. And this guy sticks in his neck here, and his head comes out here. But to the animals, there's no difference. The Serengeti is the Masai Mara is the Serengeti, because the grasses are the same. And this is one of the few maimed lions that we saw, male lions. And they're cats, they scratch. And this one here, see the baby, the cub? This is what he's supposed to be eating. He's playing with the tree. So they play with their food too. Walks on top of it. But their eyes were beautiful. And it's getting late, so we had to hurry and get back. But these are 4 cheetah brothers. There was one missing. They said there were 5, but they were right along the road. Their bellies are full, so they got something a while back. But they were, again, beautiful looking animals. And this is one of the neatest camps we went to. Kiliani, which is a Messiah warrior, is the name of the camp. And you had to cross the bridge to get to it. And the next day, we took a balloon ride and then toured the Masai Mara. This is the Mara River, where you have all the river crossings for the wildebeests that you see. Our driver said that he sat there for 5 hours once waiting for them to cross, and they would never cross. They just would tease you. We got up at 4 in the morning that day because we took a balloon ride. The sunrise was beautiful. And that's our balloon. And that's how we get in. They turn it sideways. 16 people were in the balloon. Need your mic again. It's just shots of he'd go down low to the animals and then go up high again. It was a very smooth, beautiful ride. And that was very loud. If you've ever been in a hot air balloon before, that's a very loud ride. It was a joyful trip.
Our pilot was from Canada.
And he married a Kenyan woman. But these are the chase cars. And these are shots. There we are. So we had a string out on the taking pictures. And this is a river. Again, the Mara is not a totally dry area. And these are all heading to or migrating. You can see the animals. And then when we landed, the chase cars picked us up. And how close do you get to the cheetah? I think some of you might have seen this. There's our little under the car. They played just like kittens, just jumping on each other, jumping on mom. And at the end of the balloon ride, we get breakfast. So they had breakfast set up, and there was obviously more than one balloon on that, so there were a number of people there. It's called Hot Air Safari. And then they had a loo with a view set up. The Kenyan guide was different than the Tanzanian guide, but they both had at least 10 years experience. That was really nice. Never got the Jeep or the Toyota stuck. And there were people that did get their vehicle stuck that had to need help to get things pulled out. Just how fast the Thompson's gazelles run. They're just running for no reason. One took off, so they all took off. Coming down to the Mara River, this is a vulture on a termite mound. This is the Mara River where all the crossings that you see happen. And we were lucky. We got to see a crossing or two, but this was there before. There's a crocodile here and a vulture here. But most likely these animals got trampled to death by the rest of the herd. So they were on both sides, crossing both ways. So there's no rhyme or reason to weigh or do this, but this wildebeest didn't make it. Part of the natural selection, I guess. They said there was a croc under the water holding them. That's why he couldn't get away, and then another one came on top. They were some big animals. And it's, get a look at the vehicles, but again, the zebras had to go first. And when the zebras went down, the animals followed. This was a safe crossing. So we got lucky, we got to see our first, and we didn't wait too long, maybe 15, 20 minutes, watching all the animals around. But each one of these vehicles is probably a different touring company. So, they all had different names on them. So you could go to almost any kind of touring company and get a tour in Africa. I liked the one we were with Albatross and Timbuktu. This one's taking his dinner. This poor hippopotamus was not down at the water. He was hurt. And I think the rest of the crew of hippopotamus just let him go. So he was not going to survive too much longer. And we got to sit down in the Masamar. This is where we ate lunch. There weren't any animals around, so the driver felt pretty safe. So we got out of the vehicle, and then we came to the triangle. What I wanted to show you is down here. This is an elephant skull, and these are his teeth. He gets 7 sets of teeth in his lifetime. So what the theory now is, they don't have a special ground where they go and die. They die by the water where the grass is soft, so they can eat. So, and that becomes their burial ground. That's the common theory. we broke the law. This is the boundary between Tanzania and Kenya. And you weren't allowed to cross it, so we had to stand on both sides of it. And we have a cheetah. And there was a nice set of trees there that the elephants were around. And this guy was playing hide and seek. This mother lion was 1 foot off the road. Down here are her cubs. She's watching them, debating whether they want to go for dinner or not. This guy was a great slinker. He'd down and do the crawl. And there's about 8 or 9 giraffes in this picture. This is what I expected to see. Distance away, the different animals. But we were lucky. I'm going to speed this up a little bit because I like the end of this one because this is how you usually see they all start hopping. This is what you used to see. So we got lucky and saw another one. And we were getting ready to leave, and we turned around, basically just turned the other way, and then I'm going to play this video, but I sped it up by 50% because it was a long time. So they weren't coming down that fast, but they were coming down for a long period of time. There's a crocodile coming. And here he comes here. You're safe, Julia. Yeah, they turned around and ran. Crocodile Alley. This is how they cool themselves. Through breathing. That's the only way they can cool themselves. So their mouths are sometimes open. And we got to see some meerkat. I'll show you this because this is that Iliani camp. It's right on the bend of a river. 2 years prior, they had 8 months straight of rain. And the guy said that he was walking through shoulder-high water through the camp, so it was totally wiped out. We were there the second day it was open. So we got to cross, and that is our tent. The beautiful tent. And they built all the up.
We were really roughing it that night.
Yeah. How the other half lives. They did have a glass shower, though.
We got to that camp and they greeted us, and I said, they didn't say anything about taking a shower. And I said, well, do we tell you when we need a shower? And he said, no, if you need a shower, just take one. Because all the other camps, they would meet you and you would tell them when you wanted your shower and they would put water in the buckets for you. But this one was very, very nice.
This was at dinner. There were one couple here, and then there's one other couple. They're celebrating Jane's birthday. They're carrying a cake. I'm not going to pay the whole thing. I like how they harass her though here. If I can find it. They were just making her cut the cake. And there was enough cake for everybody there. There was only those other two tables of people, unfortunately. That's their trade. Trade is moving up since COVID. The next day we drove up to Navashka region. So it's the last of the, we're starting to get into more city type things. This is the gate. We're leaving the Masamara. So the roads are quote unquote paved, and there's always animals carrying water. This is their Jeep or their taxis. People would pow on stuff, or they'd pow into these vehicles. We'd see filled with people, the roof piled with things that they carry to go from one place to another. So they're a little more popular towns. I like the stacking of them, whatever mattresses. If you want to follow them, I probably could get one. So right off the main road, and again, they drive on the right-hand side of the road, or left-hand side of the road. This is their car repair station. And this is their living area. This is the electric lines going down to all the places. So you can see how they live. This is a private girls' school, and you'll notice there's a guard. Their school is fenced in, and like any area would be fenced in, but when they attend, it's guarded. The Maasai people walking their animals on the side of the road or in the road. And this is a ministry of education. So this is a quote unquote public high school, I think. Their motto is strong roots. And that's the school. You have the school building, probably a lavatory, outhouse, and over here in their classrooms, there's some sort of education or physical education going on. And they don't have speed limits on the road. When you're going through a town like this, they have these things, speed bumps. So you don't go too fast. And this isn't open. It's deserted right now, but obviously during better times that would be flourished with people. Whatever they have to move around, they move around. Garage area. You can get a little better view of the speed bump here. You have your taxis, people walking along on the dirt. It's a little busier town. This is more of a city. And this is a farming area. That's grain. They are drying it beside the dirt road. So and this is how they turn it. It was going this way. Now they're turning it to dry and go that way. So they just lay out tarps, and you can imagine the amount of dirt that's in that. There's some more drying areas there. They don't have a lot of farming equipment. You don't see a lot of tractors. It's a lot of hand work. There's stores. A hotel is not what we look at as a hotel in the United States. This is more like a bar or a place to stay and get something to eat real quick. It's not an overnight place to sleep. But they do have technology. And this is the lake where we're headed. This is our home for the next night. It's called Navasha, which is the name of the lake. It's a region that grows roses. It's probably one of the most, I think they said that it was the most popular rose growing region in Europe. They supply to Germany and different countries in Europe. And this is what our building looked like on the inside. This was one half of it. We came in this door. The other. This is another roughing it. They have rose petals. And then we went into the bathroom and couldn't find the towels. And they said, "Did you look on the bed?" And this is the front porch. Each place had its own little pool. And the next night we stayed, they had swans. And over on this hill, you can't see it, there was a puff of smoke constantly coming out. They had geothermal electricity over here. So the region is, you're getting into the more populated area. You know, we have the monkey at the swimming pool. Again, nobody is eating there. And this is the lake where we stayed. And we went past this lake here and over to, this is another national park, and where we finally got to see the rhinoceroses. Had to wait for them to clear the animals. And they only had one major road going north-south. And this was it. So when you're on it, if you remember old Route 22, this was the old Route 22, where you pass if you feel lucky. Hundreds of these types of stands, all selling the same thing. I think he said these were onions, but you can see this stand never opened. And then we went to the Lake Nicola National Park. This is it, but you can see the cities starting to close in. This is a fenced-in park, the whole entire area, to keep the animals in and keep the people out, and keep the animals from going into the people's yards. If you notice the white around the trees here, that's a salt lake. And we finally got to see our rhinoceros. The slight hump in the back, this is a black rhinoceros. And these guys here, I had to take a little bit, just had to roll in the mud. Keeps the bugs off. That's why they're rolling in the mud, but it was funny to watch them roll in the mud. And the lake was full of birds. Mainly flamingos. We have eagles, these are full-grown ducks. I forget the name. These are cormorant. It's a stork. And all the different animals, and hiding in amongst the animals is the straight back, and that's a white rhinoceros. And this is a little baby. They were quite a ways off in the distance, but at least we got to see them. So we got to see the big five: lions, leopards, elephants, rhinoceroses, and buffalo. So we have the buffalo here and then a rhinoceros laying here. If there's water, you'll find an animal. We ate lunch in this area, and you didn't leave your box unattended. And we got to go out near the waterfall here, and this is how he chased away the animals. It's a slingshot. Just the different. This is the male. You can see the flat top. And then in the same park, it suddenly turned treed, and the monkeys were there. And then we left the park and got back to our lodge for a sunset. And then the next day we were going over here to what's called the Ark, but you couldn't go straight across because this is a big forest, and this is a national park also. We have caution deer crossing. They have caution hyenas, zebras, antelope, giraffes, and buffalo. You wouldn't want to hit any one of those. We crossed the equator. And this is the scarf that Jane has. But the guy pulled out a bucket and then a funnel and dumped water through the funnel into the bucket. He stood back here and it spun counterclockwise. He dropped a matchstick in it and it spun counterclockwise. He walked 5 feet in front of this sign, did the same thing, and it spun clockwise. And then he stood right under the sign and did the same thing, and the match didn't spin at all. So we knew we were on the equator. But this is another little tourist area. You can see the different driving schools, why they would have to drive, not many. This is the main road. Trucks are stopped, big holes in the road, and it's dirt. Your grocery store, your butcher stop. Selling furniture. A lot of these stands are still covered up, but you can see the businesses. And it's Sunday again, and they're in church. So they do have most of their schools are tied to some sort of religious group. We sponsor one in Malawi, excuse me. We went to a country club, which was a golf country club. It would be unwise to approach or tease or feed the animals. But it is a country club. So we stopped there, and then they took us over to the Aberdare National Park, the Ark Gate, to where our next hotel was. Interesting about this park, it's totally fenced in, but it's hundreds of kilometers long. And down here, one of the sponsoring agencies is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So we do help them a little bit. And this is the park, how big it is. We came into the Ark Gate, and you'll see there's no roads to go through this park. It's very hilly, but there is a little bit here. And we got to go into the park or tour it a little bit. But this is the Ark Hotel. They built it in the 60s to look like Noah's Ark. And the rooms are 60s. They're very small. But it was nice. But each floor level, there's 4 levels here. One is a bunker right at ground level. One is a glassed-in area. One is an open patio, and one is just like a crow's nest type thing. And you're looking at the elephants that come. They throw out salt. So they do bring the animals in a way that there's salt on the ground. That's why they're all there. They need the salt. And here's a good look at the difference in the horns for the buffalo. I'm going to speed through this because it's 5 minutes and time's getting long, but the elephants take care of their own. Yeah, the babies are here, and let me get to the birds. They put out feed for birds at a certain time of day every day, and the birds know it. So all they do is whistle, and all these birds come flying. They get beautiful birds. This took place for about 45 minutes to an hour. These are hyenas. And it was fun to watch the elephants pack around their young, and the hyenas trying to work their way in. They'd chase them away, and they'd come up.
Chasing hyenas.
There's this. Move it ahead a little bit. But you can see there's a pack of them that come up over the hill. So at one time there were 8 or 9 hyenas, and they eventually worked the elephants around. That these buffalo right here in the middle, they chased them out. But this baby elephant moved a little bit away from his mother too much, and Dad here shoved them back under. It was fun. But the interaction between the animals here, and how the hyenas would chirp to each other and click to each other and communicate, and how the elephants always watched out for each other. So these guys eventually came through and chased these guys off, because the hyena don't jump them. They run them till they are exhausted. When they fall over, they eat them. So we left the Ark and went through Abadir Park. And it's a real blurry picture, but it's the first leopard we saw on the ground for about 2 seconds. And because of the area, it's very mountainous, a lot of green, almost rainforest type things, the Sykes monkey, a lot of moss, Spanish moss. But it had just rained, and the roads were treacherous, and we couldn't get to the waterfalls that we wanted to see. He wanted to take us to. But we did get to see a few of the animals. Treetops. This is where Queen Elizabeth became queen. She was staying at Treetops as princess, and then when her father died, she became queen, and they had to rush her out and make sure she was safe and everything like that. It's closed, was closed right now, but that's as close as we could get to it. And it's just interesting that it's 70 years now that she's been queen. tomorrow, I believe it is. So this is where she became queen. Picture of the ark. This guy actually chased that boar. He quit after a while. And I think these were like pet cats or regular tame cats, but they had very long, long tails. They were sort of neat looking animal. And we left the ark and had a long drive down to Nairobi. These are either packets of salt, where they would get them from the lake, the water from the lake, and dry the salt, or rice. Cabbage. They didn't think twice about overloading it. And this was the major north-south road again, but it's a little better shape, and they were widening it. So they were doing some road construction. With people carrying, they needed wood. Okay. And then we finally get to the city, and they're building us overhead road. And we stayed at another country club called Karen Residence right outside of Nairobi, probably 15 minutes. And this is where we stayed. One couple stayed here, and we stayed over here. So it was a beautiful place. Shared common area, and that was our room. And this was the golf course. This is Nairobi. The Karen Residence. Anybody recognize the name Karen Blixen? Out of Africa. This is where she was. That's why it's called Karen, because of her. And we didn't go too far. This is not an area big far, but we went to the Karen Blixen Museum, and this is where she is a renowned baroness. This is where she lived. She tried to start coffee beans, and the area is too low in altitude for coffee beans, so it didn't really take, but she paid all her help, which made why the country was so, loved her so much. But this was her house. And in the book, she talks about the Washboard Mountains, I believe it is. And this is what they look like. Imagine without the big trees in front of them now. And every place had a wall and a gate. Every place. You could drive along the road and get your gate or block or your garden materials. We went to a place called Seldrick Wildlife Trust, and it's an elephant orphanage. If they find a baby elephant out in the wild anywhere in Africa, they call this place. They go out and get that baby elephant and bring them back here. And they feed them and nurture them for years and eventually try and put them out. They have other places that they take them, and eventually hope that he attaches to a herd of elephants and becomes part of the wild elephant herd again. So to get in, you had to adopt an elephant. So you paid an adoption fee and plus an entrance fee. But they were fun to watch. And they only come down 11 to 12 because they come down and feed them. And then they show off for the people. You get to touch them. And then we have the Karen Blixen Giraffe Center. And these are, again, orphan giraffes that they've raised. And you get to feed them. They have a very rough tongue. Their vision is a world living in harmony with nature. And he swung his head and hit mine. He's a tough little character. And we didn't go straight from Kenya. We went from Kenya to Doha to Chicago and had an extra night stay in Chicago. But that was our trip.